Alright guys, so apparently there's this thing that's been going around for a long time that I've been oblivious to, but that is tier ranking. So tier ranking things like music, movies. So of course, I'm here to tier rank some books. And before I get started, I just want to say I found out about tier ranking through a video that Hanna from A Clockwork Reader filmed. So props to her. And I looked on YouTube and I hadn't seen anyone who had ranked what I'm going to rank, which is every historical fiction book I've ever read. If you watch any of my videos, you know that I am a big fan of historical fiction. I have read 27 historical fiction books, I guess, since I started reading them. So 27 isn't that much, but it's enough, and they're all like big titles that you've probably heard of. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Tier Maker, and we're going to rank all 27 books that I've read. So let's get started. All right, so here are the different tier rankings and my whole thingamajig. And to get us started off, we have History in the Making. These are for the best of the best historical fiction books. Then we have Great, Good, Okay, and The Great Depression. We don't want to be in here. I don't know if any of these are going to fall into that category. I have read some really good historical fiction, so hopefully The Great Depression will stay in isolation. All right, so here are the books we're going to go through, and we're going to tier rank. Let's get started. So to begin, we have The Winter Garden. From what I remember about this book, it is a World War II story that kind of relates to this Russian fairy tale, and these girls are separated from their mother, and then there's a little twist. Now, it's a book by Kristen Hanna, so normally I love Kristen Hanna's books, but this one was a disappointment. I mean, I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, but I barely remember anything about it, and what I do remember is that it underwhelmed me. So for this very first one, I think that we're going to have to put it not here, but here. It's just, okay. Then the next book on my list here is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. I thought this book was great. It takes place like in kind of roaring 20-ish era in New York City and had a lot to do with theater and women empowerment and things like that. It definitely wasn't history in the making. It's either great or good. Like, I remember how this book made me feel, so I want to say it was great. Oh, but then I remember that I hated, like, the second half of the book. Yeah, okay. It was good. The first half was full of energy, and the second half was like a memoir, so I can't really say it was great because I was bored for the whole ending. Okay, the next book we have is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. This is the same author who wrote Me Before You, and this was a historical fiction about these pack horse librarians in the mountains, and kind of a romance as well, and an empowerment story. I would put this on the same level as The City of Girls. They were both good, but they weren't as bad as The Winter Garden, but it didn't, once again, really like blow me away. I remember kind of being bored for moments in the story. So yeah, Giver of Stars is just good. Next, we have The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Some people would argue if this is even a historical fiction book, but I would say it is. It takes place in the 1950s in Alaska, and while the history isn't a huge aspect of it, it is kind of classified as that. And I loved how raw the story was. It had a lot to do with domestic violence and a little bit of abuse, but the way that it was told had so much emotional depth that I think I'm going to have to give it a great. I also really related to the main character, and I got to see the main character grow from like a little kid to an adult and how her experiences changed her. It was one of those where like the character arc is so clear that you just can't help but be blown away. I freaking love Kristen Hanna. Okay, then we have The Shadow of the Wind. So I'm not going back to look at synopses before I filmed them because I thought it would be nice to just kind of see for myself how much I remembered. So with Shadow of the Wind, I remember that it's mysterious and that it has to do with these last books. And it's like a little bit of a romance. What I remember about this book is how lyrically it was written and how it made me feel wrapped up in this beautiful literary world. And the setting was so atmospheric that I feel like I have to put it in great. Like, I feel like remembering that this was a great book. And when I read it, I was like, oh, I need to read all the other books by this author. And I haven't. But yeah, that book was magical. Okay, next we have the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. So I can already tell you that some of these books are going to receive different rankings. Let's start off with Stalking Jack the Ripper. This one was one of my favorites. It's the one where the main character meets, that dreamboat guy. I can't remember his name. But yeah, so because this was the first one in the series, I think it had more like wow fact for me. I read it and I was like, dang, like, it was really good. And the romance was so sweet. Then the next book in the series was Hunting Prince Dracula. This one had a lot of these crazy scenes in like this underground tavern. And I actually liked this one better than the first one because of the setting. It was in Romania or whichever country it is where all of the vampire stories originate from. It was there in like a castle. And also the relationship between the main characters started to really progress. Cresswell is his name. Oh, he's a dreamboat. And he is such a dreamboat in Prince Dracula that this one is actually going to be, I don't know. It seems wrong to put it next to The Great Alone, but it was pretty great. I might move it. I can still move it. This is my tier maker. Okay, then we have Escaping from Houdini. This one took place on a cruise ship, and I remember thinking that the way that people were killed off was really creative. It had to do with like a card game, but it didn't like blow my mind. So I think for Escaping from Houdini, I'm gonna put it with good. And then now we talk about Capturing the Devil. So I didn't like the ending to this series. And I thought that the last one, Capturing the Devil, was way longer than it needed to be. And the romance I thought was actually so horribly written in this one. The ending was overall really disappointing to me. Even though it had like such creepy moments too, I thought it was kind of the worst book in the whole series. So I think that because it made me so sad how horrible this book is, this one is going to have to be the Great Depression for me, I think. Sad times. Okay. Next we have The Nightingale. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this in history in the making because it is one of my favorite historical fictions of all time. It follows two sisters during World War II, and they live in France when it's occupied by the Nazis. And one of the sisters is she becomes a secret agent called the Nightingale, and she does all these amazing things. But then the other sister does amazing things too, just in a more domestic, housewifey way. So it is the main character who is the Nightingale, and the story that ends up making me love it so much. Her bravery and just everything is so well done. Kristen, Hanna, it's her best book. So loved it. Okay. Next, we have The Orphan Train. This book is interesting because it's half YA, half historical fiction. So part of it follows the story of a girl who was on the orphan train whenever that was a thing that passed through the country. And then the other is a modern day girl who's in foster care and her experiences. It was good, but like not on the level of these. Like it was just a solid book that I enjoyed, but the writing, I remember it being kind of average, and I don't know, it just didn't resonate on like a deep level with me, but it was a good book. Then we have The Lost Wife. This book, I barely remember anything about it. I almost forgot the title. It's another World War II story about this relationship, and then the wife or the girl she gets married. The day after she gets married, she's taken away to a concentration camp, I think, or something like that. She's barely married at all. And I won't tell you what happens in the end, but I remember being really disappointed by this book. Even the ending, I found it to be not very satisfying for me. So it's just okay. Then we have The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult. So this book is another World War II story. It follows a lady who works in a bakery, and she starts visiting this woman who is telling her stories, basically the storyteller. And so most of the story consists of the stories that she is told about this woman's experiences during World War II. Or no, it's the man's experiences during World War II. And those are very interesting. And she learned something bad, and she has to decide what to do with that information. This is another one of the best World War II stories that I have ever read. And I remember liking this one as much as I like this one. It's history in the making. It's so good. All right, so next we have Wind Calls the Heart by Janet Oak. If you've seen the the TV show, the Hallmark TV show, it's the first book in the series is very similar to the TV show, but then the rest of the books in the series are actually kind of lackluster. Basically in the second books and beyond, or at least in the second book, she gives up being a teacher and decides that her true calling is in her marriage and being a good wife. And while I'm fine with that, I kind of made me personally a little upset. I know that those are different times, but I love the main character when she's a teacher and she's battling the wilderness on her own. So for the first book, I would say it's good. I, as a teacher, really enjoy the teacherness story of it and the wholesomeness of it. But if I was ranking the whole series, I probably would put it in okay, or maybe even the Great Depression. Then we have The Book Thief. Oh my gosh. So I just have to instantly put The Book Thief in history in the making. I still remember when I read that book for the very first time. It was just different. The fact that it was narrated by Death, the main character, the boy with the lemon-colored hair, all of it was just so special and unique to me, and I've never found a book like it again. So yeah, it's an amazing story. If you read it, you'll cry, but read it. Then we have another great story, Daisy Jones and the Six. This follows basically a story of a band and Daisy Jones, the main singer, and it goes on about the grittiness of life in fame. I loved this story, and I listened to it through audiobook, which I think is the best way to listen to it, but it's not, for me, on the same level as these books. So for me, I would have to say it was great, and it was great. The romance and all of the conflict had me speeding through the story, but it wasn't on this level. Then we have the Guernsey Literary Potato Filth and Pie Society. This book, so good. It takes place during World War II on Guernsey Island. The island is occupied by the Germans. It's a British island, and to cope with it, the residents, some of them, create a literary society. And they read books, and some of the members fall in love, and it's told as an epistolary novel. So it's a little different than if you watch the Netflix show, but the romance is sweet, and the story is so fun and quirky and clever that I'd have to say it was great. I remember the feeling of this story so deeply. And I remember swooning for the male love interest in the story too. I can't remember his name, but he was such a swoony character. And then we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This story was really special too. Evelyn Hugo, basically it follows her journey into fame and shows the underside of the fame, like the life of fame as well. And I was just obsessed with it. There was so much conflict. I was flipping through the pages and I loved watching Evelyn grow and really discover who she was. I had a lot to do with like the power men can have over women, but then women finding their own power too. And I always loved that. And I just can't forget about this book. Like, it's always in my mind in a certain place. And I think that that's the kind of thing that puts it in top tier history in the making. That book is so, so special. Next, we have The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. This follows a man named Monty, and it's a love story between him and his best friend, and also his kind of adventures as he tours the continent, and then things happen, and he's suddenly without money, and pirates are involved. I remember it being a lot of fun, and like pretty action-packed too. Overall, I would say at first it was like a really good book, but now that I think about it, it wasn't on the same. No. Okay, fine. It was good. It was good. I love Monty and Percy. Yeah, it was definitely good. I don't know what I was thinking. Okay. Next, we have Rudis Apetti's Salt to the Sea. This is a World War II story that takes place in Eastern Europe, and it's near the end of World War II, and there is a sinking that is bigger than the frickin' Titanic that no one talks about, and it follows a journey as these passengers get on this boat, and it sinks. There are lots of different perspectives, and that was confusing to me at first. Really confusing. But I ended up liking the story because there was so much conflict that I was flipping through it. But it doesn't stay with me as much as the other ones did. So while I liked it, I think that because there were so many characters, I was never able to get into one character's head enough to really enjoy the story. So for that, to me, it was just okay. Next, we have Z. This is a fictionalized biography of the life of Zelda Fitzgerald. So the content of the story is based off of Zelda's life, and some of it is really fun and awesome, and some of it is quite tragic and full of despair. It really relates a lot to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, and the fact that Zelda Fitzgerald lived a pretty famous life of fun and debauchery, and then it went tragically downhill. I thought it was well written and entertaining. I was hooked for a lot of it while I read it, but it was just good to me. Then we have The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. This follows the story of a girl who ends up going to one of her old family members' houses, I think, and discovering that her family member was like a picture book artist. And even though I'm describing the synopsis of the story kind of poorly, I remember thinking that it was so well written and lyrical and beautiful, and it like transported me. So I would have to put it in the great tier. It's not like here. It was almost here, but I can't remember much of the plot, so it must not have been that engaging. Next, we have Watch the Lady. I don't normally read a lot of Tudor-style historical fiction, but this had a lot of like court drama and had a lot to do with like these two different poets, Shelley, one of them, and just drama in the court with the queen. And I remember liking it, but I don't remember much about it. I remember being kind of hot, if you know what I mean. I'm going to rank it as okay, just because, I cannot remember that much about it. Yeah. Okay. Then we have All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. A lot of people, I think, would instantly put this like in top tier, and it was good. It's a World War II story. I think most of it takes place in France, or leaving France and going somewhere else. And the daughter, the main character, is blind. And a cool part of this story is that her father builds her like cities to trace with her fingers so that she can learn the layout of the places that she lives. This book is so sad. Oh. But it's really interesting, and I don't know, I was going to put it here, but now when I think about all the little details of this story and the minutia, I feel like I have to put it here. And like just thinking about some of the things that happened made me feel like I was going to tear up. So I definitely have to put it in history in the making. Next we have the Tattooist of Auschwitz. A Holocaust story about a man who is the tattooist at Auschwitz. Basically, when they come in, he puts the numbers on the people who come to the concentration camp. And I remember that it was not written well. And a lot of times I felt like reading it was a chore. And it was a short book, but it took me forever to get through. So because of all of that, like, it's even worse than these. Like, I wouldn't say that it's just awful, but I did not love it, and I didn't think it was written well. So it's the Great Depression. And then our last one is Lilac Girls, and this follows 3 different girls during World War II. One of them works at a concentration camp. One of them is like a little debutante in New York City. And the other one is a Polish girl who is taken into a concentration camp. And how their 3 lives intertwine, it's a beautiful story. It focuses a little bit too much on the New York side for me. I like to be in the nitty-gritty of it all in my World War II stories. That sounds bad, but I enjoy the darker side of it, believe it or not. But it was a great book. Yeah. And there you have it. Those are my every historical fiction book that I have read ranked. So a lot of them were good. I'm trying to see if there's anything that I think I would change now. I don't know. When I look at this list here, I almost feel like Hunting Prince Dracula should just be good. So history in the making, the best ones are The Nightingale, The Storyteller, The Book Thief, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn, Hugo, and All the Light We Cannot See. Amazing books. Then for great, we have The Great Alone, The Shadow of the Wind, Daisy Jones and the Six, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, The Forgotten Garden, and Lilac Girls. Those are probably all 4-star reads. Then good, City of Girls, Giver of Stars, Stalking Jack the Ripper, Escaping from Houdini, Orphan Train, When Calls the Heart, Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and Hunting Prince Dracula. All good. Okay books, Winter Garden, Lost Wife, Salt to the Sea, Watch the Lady, and The Great Depression, Capturing the Devil, and Tattooist of Auschwitz. So hopefully from watching this video, you have discovered some books that you will like yourself. If you have read any of these books, I would love to hear your thoughts on them. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I have left the tier maker link in my description box, and I'll also leave the link so that if you want to do this tier and rank them yourself on what you've read, you can do that too. So if you like this video, hit the like button. In the comments below, let me know if you've read any of these books on my list and what you've thought about them. Or if there's a historical fiction book that you have read that I haven't, let me know because I would love to check it out, especially if you loved it. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. I post new videos every Wednesday and Saturday, and I have so many new ideas for more videos too that I can't wait to get out. And that's going to be it for now. Thanks for stopping by.